Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Fulvio. I have several drawbacks today. Number one is that it's already siesta time. I'm from Spain, and we're approaching siesta time. And secondly, most important, this is an asthma meeting, and I've been tasked to talk about vaccines. And hopefully you will understand why there was this request. But as Walter was saying, lately I'm accumulating positions. So apart from my positions in my hospital and in my university, I'm also in REICOP, that is the Spanish Network of Research of Long COVID. I'm the scientific director. In the CNPT, that's the Spanish Committee Against Tobacco, I'm the vice president. But I'm also baby president. I'm just 1 week old president of REG, the Respiratory Effectiveness Group. So I take this chance to invite you to London. It's always nice in any season to go to London, but mark in your calendars spring, 20 to 22nd of March in London, we'll have the summit of the Respiratory Effectiveness Group. Several of you are already lecturers and speakers in the Respiratory Effectiveness Group, and I'm sure there will be not only on asthma, but also on other respiratory topics, things that will be of your interest. And by the way, Michael Walker told me to have a photo of the good relationships that we have in between the World Asthma Congress and the REG. So I thought that probably we could recreate the kiss of Brezhnev, the comrade Brezhnev, and the Chancellor Merkel of Germany. So I don't know, Fulvio, if you want to volunteer, come here to my arms, yourself, or perhaps your Secretary General. Or I don't know. I mean, in REG, I noticed something very important, and this is that actually you two could kiss each other because you are close friends, and you are very modern. We are very flexible, and perhaps I don't know. Would you like to be comrade? Would you like to be chancellor? And this would be a big commercial success for eventually the REG summit in March next year. So consider this, perhaps in dinner we recreate this kiss. Good. So these are my disclosures, and during the next minutes, this will be the agenda that I will follow. I'm a respiratory epidemiologist, and I will give you my perspective on what should be the vaccination on respiratory disease. So after a short introduction, I'll give you a historical perspective on vaccinations. I will tell you about the life course of vaccinations in our respiratory patients. And of course, I will talk about COVID. So let me start with the introduction with a case record. Most of you are not epidemiologists, you are practicing physicians. And let me start by a single case record. This is a man, 62-year-old, that actually from Germany, he chose the wrong university. He didn't go to Christian, he went to Magdeburg University. He showed himself to primary care external consultations with no known analogies. He was a non-smoker, moderate drinker, and denies any illicit drugs. But researchers from that university said that the man received 217 COVID vaccinations deliberately and for private reasons. So, surprise, surprise, the diagnosis of this patient is hypervaccination, and the interesting thing is that he had no side effects in any of the 217 vaccinations. Also, for 3 years, he was not infected with SARS-CoV-2. He had not COVID-19. So what is my conclusion to you? If you want to beef up your curriculum and you have a paper in the Lancet, identify one patient like this, create 30 tables and figures that are unreadable, but with a lot of colors, but no one can reject you if they don't understand the figures, and then you will have a Lancet paper on vaccines. Having said this, I would like to go to history. And Walter said that I love humanism. I do. And we need to know where we come from to know the quo vadis, where are we going? So we come from smallpox, and smallpox, something happened in 1798. After the 19th century especially, there has been an explosion on vaccines. So I'm going to suggest you something. Today is Thursday, but the airport is not far from here. I'm sure that some of you already have your passports with you, but the thing is that we are going to do a travel in geography and in time. So even if you don't have your passport with you, we will fly to the European Union. First, we will start in England, then we'll go to Venice, not far from here, maybe we can go by train. Then we will move to Germany, in Hanover, and then we will go back to Italy, to Torino. So we start our trip in 1798 in Berkeley, England. Over there, this Dr. Jenner, who was a primary care doctor, identified something during a smallpox outbreak in England. And he identified that there was another disease in cows. It was very similar to smallpox, it was cowpox. And that the ladies who were milking the cows, in their hands were getting blisters and something very similar to cowpox, but they didn't have smallpox. So he had the idea, let me remove some of the pus from the blisters of the hands of these ladies, and he was injecting this pus in a child of 10-year-old in the village. Of course, without the permission of the child or the mother of the father of the child. Ethics committee in the 18th century were not available. Well, the interesting thing is that after feeling some mild symptoms, he put the child for 2 weeks in the house full of people with smallpox, and the child didn't develop smallpox and survived. That was the beginning of the first vaccine. We are now moving about 50 years from England to Italy. And in 1853 in Venice, something happened. And this was the opening of La Traviata. For those of you who are not Italian, La Traviata means the lost one. It's the story of a prostitute. And actually, the prostitute had tuberculosis thesis. Let's see if it works. The video, the technician at the bottom, if you could click. So, especially for the young people in the audience, you're going to see a death by tuberculosis. This is Violetta Valeri, and she's having the swan song. The swans are mute, but like in tuberculosis, at the end of their life, they feel energy. So Violetta is feeling a lot of this energy, and she will sing this just now. Tragical death, para view. You agree with me, Verdi was a maestro from Milano, but actually he knew about medicine at that time, especially because at that time, at that time, tuberculosis was hereditary. For more than 2,000 years, phthisis was considered an hereditary disease. Violetta cannot infect the boyfriend, Alfredo, or the father of Alfredo, or even the doctor, because they were of different social class. She was a courtesan, a prostitute, a poor person, so she could not infect the other members of that family. This conception changed 30 years later in Germany, in Hanover, especially because there was this German doctor, Robert Koch, that 142 years ago published this paper, the Etiologie de Tuberculose, on the etiology of tuberculosis. So in 1882, Koch identified that tuberculosis was not an hereditary disease, that actually it was produced by the bacille of Koch, the bacille of tuberculosis. He had already identified 6 years before the cause of anthrax, and the next year identified also the cause of cholera. For that reason and some others, he was awarded the Nobel Prize of Medicine in 1905. But the important thing is that these medical news were also in all the newspapers, in Germany, in the UK, and also in Italy. And for instance, when in Torino in 1896 there was another maestro, Puccini, who was writing on La Bohème, another opera on tuberculosis. The point is that Mimi, who is also dying today, I'm very sinister, I'm sorry, but Mimi can not only infect her flightmates, but she can also infect the owner of the house and all the neighbors in the neighborhood, because it was finally considered that tuberculosis was an infectious disease. So here we see Alfredo, who arrives, and the friends say, look, Mimi just passed there.
Vuol dire? Quale andare a venire? Quale guardarmi? Cos'è?
This is the beginning of our next journey. So if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about the whereabouts of opera and medicine, there are these two publications of mine. One is already old, almost 8 years ago, but then this one is more recent. It was rejected by all journals, including respiratory medicine, but eventually it was published. It's online, free of charge in Medicina Clinica. So let me go back to the things that interest you and your patients, and these the calendars that are available. And there has been an outburst, an explosion of vaccines available from especially the diphtheria, the polio, and also the tuberculosis that Calmet and Guerin produced a vaccine for tuberculosis already available for almost 100 years up to now. Especially I like that you use this resource. If you Google vaccine schedule European CDC, you can get the vaccine schedule of every European European country that you visit. For instance, I Googled vaccine schedule European CDC Italy, and for instance, we are not interested today in vaccination for children, but for adults, especially for the elderly, in this country, it is recommended that all adults receive COVID vaccination, the DPT, the influenza, the pneumococcal, and especially if they are not immunosuppressed, the herpes zoster. My question to you is about respiratory syncytial virus that in many other European countries, this is still available, we can discuss over there. If I can recommend you one paper about about vaccinations in respiratory patients, is this French paper by Pierre-Régis Bourgel, available this year, in which they recommend that the vaccine for pneumococcus should be for tous les patients. The COVID vaccine should be available for tous les patients. The whooping cough should be available for all the respiratory patients, tous les patients, especially if they are not immunocompromised. And the zona, the herpes zoster, should be available if they didn't receive this before the age of 74. Again, this probably should be updated now with the respiratory syncytial virus. When I teach fourth-year medical students in Spain, I used to review this wonderful review in the New England Journal of Medicine of 10 years ago by Nabel, Designing Tomorrow's Vaccines. And this is a world that is fascinating, especially because during the 20th century saved many lives. Only in the US, these were the estimated cases, most of them finishing in death during the 20th century. Check in 2002 that all of these millions of cases and millions of deaths came to zero in many of these diseases. Of course, this was associated with new developments in the manufacturing of these vaccines. And we could debate about inactivated viruses, attenuated viruses, live viruses, and other. Of course, this changed 5 years ago with COVID-19. And COVID-19 created the first vaccine tested in humans with RNA messenger. And the messenger RNA is something that allows that we are here today. Because without the technology of RNA messenger, probably we would still be confined and in lockdown. So the 5 vaccines that we have available for COVID-19, the Pfizer, Moderna, Janssen, AstraZeneca, and Novavax, plus the ones by China and Russia, that they are not available in Europe or away from these countries, but probably they have a very similar efficacy. And here you have in the first column the efficacy that is more than 90%, something closer to 95% for symptomatic disease, but they also are 70% or higher for the protection for hospitalization or intensive care unit. However, we have a problem, the vaccine hesitant moment. In the US and also in many places in the world, there are many people that disbelieve on vaccines. And this is a small area map that is similar to the voting in the US. In red, you have the small area counties in the US that 30% or more of the population disbelieve of COVID-19 vaccines or any other vaccine. Actually, in some of these counties, it is more common to disbelieve vaccines than to believe on them. More than 50% disbelieve on COVID-19. We have to fight this fake news, especially because these are the fake news that I identified on the COVID-19 vaccines. And probably one of the big ones, we can laugh about this, is that Bill Gates was implanting the microchips to control us during the COVID-19 vaccines. But there were other similar fake good news that actually we could laugh at, like the transmission by mosquitoes, by parcels, by the 5G network, and some others. The important thing is that the vaccines save lives, also the COVID-19 vaccines. So I'm trying to finalize on time, and I would like to give you some general conclusions. First, that vaccines save lives. They are drugs, and of course we have to monitor their adverse effects, but they do save lives. That also in our respiratory patients, not only they reduce morbidity and reduce their access to hospital and their visits to primary care or to other, but also they reduce mortality. And that all together, we need to row together in the right direction to fight vaccine hesitancy and vaccine misinformation. Thank you.